Welcome to the deep dive. We're about to jump into a whole stack of sources covering biodiversity and conservation.
Yep, got articles, some research notes here.
And our mission today is really to slice through it all, pull out those essential insights, and make sure you really get a handle on what biodiversity actually is, why it's so incredibly important, and frankly, the critical state it's in.
It's definitely not just an academic exercise, is it? It's fundamental. It's about life on Earth,
Yeah,
our connection to it.
exactly.
And the sources you've gathered, they give us a really solid base. We can start with the basics, the definitions, and then build up to the pretty complex challenges we're facing.
Okay, let's do that. Let's unpack this term, biodiversity. We hear it all the time, news, documentaries, everywhere. But what does it really mean? My first thought is always simple. Bio is life, diversity is variety. So just the variety of life. Is that too simple?
No, that's a great starting point. Simple and clear. But the glossary source we have here expands on that quite a bit. It defines biodiversity as, yes, the diversity of different species, but also the genetic variability within those species, which is crucial. And then there's the variety of ecosystems they form.
Ah, okay, so multiple layers.
Exactly. Think of it as the total number and variety of organisms in a given region. That includes everything: plants, animals, fungi, even tiny microorganisms, plus their genes, their unique genetic makeup, and the complex ecosystems they build together.
So it's the sum total of all that variation among living things on Earth.
Precisely. It's much broader than just counting species.
It really is. And this variety, it's not something that just appeared recently, right? The sources emphasize its deep history.
Oh, absolutely. What we see today is the product of, well, an immense evolutionary journey. We're talking somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 billion years of evolution.
Billion with a B. That's almost impossible to really picture.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? Life has been diversifying, changing, adapting on this planet for an unimaginable length of time.
So how much life are we talking about? How many unique forms have come out of this massive process? Do we even know?
That's one of the really striking things in these sources. The estimates are, frankly, all over the place. Some say maybe 2 million species. Others suggest it could be over 100 million globally.
Wow, that's a huge range.
It is. The notes suggest around 10 million is probably a decent working estimate. But here's the kicker.
Uh-oh.
The vast majority of those species, the ones we estimate exist, they haven't even been scientifically classified yet. We haven't named them, described them.
You're kidding.
Not at all.
Yeah.
There's a specific example mentioned.
Yeah.
Something like 40% of all freshwater fish species, just from South America alone, are thought to be undescribed by science.
40% just in one group, in one region. That's staggering. What does that even mean for trying to understand it all, let alone conserve it?
It means we're essentially trying to protect a library where most of the books haven't even been cataloged yet. We don't know the full extent, the complexity.
So species could be disappearing before we even know they exist.
Precisely. We lose unique genetic codes, potential ecological knowledge, forever. It just highlights the incredible richness, but also the scale of the conservation challenge we face.
Okay. So, massive variety, largely unknown, forged over billions of years. Is this variety spread out evenly across the globe?
No, definitely not. That's another key point. Biodiversity is very unevenly distributed. The sources consistently point out it's much, much richer in the tropics.
Near the equator.
Yes. As you move towards the poles, you generally find fewer different types of species. Now, the populations of those fewer species might be huge, but the overall variety drops off. Tropical forests, in particular, are singled out as biodiversity powerhouses.
It makes sense, doesn't it? Consistent warmth, sunlight, rainfall, all that energy and water seems to fuel this incredible richness.
Exactly. Those conditions foster high productivity, complex interactions. But it's also important to remember something the sources highlight. Extinction itself isn't unnatural.
Right. Things change over time.
Species have a kind of natural lifespan.
Yeah.
The average half-life is estimated at maybe 1 to 4 million years. And if you look back across all of Earth's history, maybe 99% of all species that ever lived are now extinct. It's part of the cycle.
Okay, so extinction happens naturally, but the sources are pretty clear that what's happening now is different, alarmingly different.
That is the absolute critical distinction. Before humans really became a dominant force, Earth likely supported more biodiversity than it does now. But since our emergence, and especially with our increasing population and resource use, we've seen this incredibly rapid decline. an accelerated rate of extinction.
So this isn't the slow, natural background rate over millions of years?
Not at all. This is fast, it's widespread, and it's largely driven by us, our overuse of resources, changing landscapes.
Ah.
It's unprecedented in its speed.
That distinction feels vital. Okay, so we have this vast, ancient, unevenly spread variety of life, and it's facing rapid, human-driven threats. The sources also help break down this huge concept by looking at different levels of biodiversity.
Right, it helps to think about it on three interconnected levels, like nested dolls almost.
Okay, level 1, genetic diversity. What's that about?
This is all about the variation within a single species. Think about us, humans, Homo sapiens. We're one species, but look at the incredible variety in height, skin color, hair color, all sorts of physical features. That's genetic diversity in action.
And why does that matter?
It's fundamentally important for a species' health and survival. It provides the raw material for adaptation. If the environment changes or a new disease pops up, having that genetic variation within the population increases the chance that some individuals will have traits that allow them to cope and survive. It's key for healthy breeding, too.
So it's like the species' internal toolkit for resilience. Okay, level 2 is probably what most people think of first. Species diversity.
Exactly. This is the straightforward variety of different species in a given place. How many different kinds of birds, insects, plants, fungi are in that forest or on that coral reef? It's measured by richness, just the number of species, and often abundance, how many individuals of each species there are. And like we said, some places are just naturally much richer than others.
Got it. And the final, broadest level, ecosystem diversity.
This takes the widest view. It's about the variety of different ecosystems themselves across the planet or a region. Think deserts, rainforests, grasslands, wetlands, coral reefs, mountain ranges, all these different types of environments.
And the variety within them.
Yes, it includes the variety of habitats within those larger ecosystems and all the complex ecological processes, nutrient cycling, energy flow that happen in each type. The sources do note that drawing exact lines between ecosystems can be tricky, they often blend, but it's about recognizing that large-scale variety of life systems.
Okay, so we have genetic diversity within species, the variety of species themselves, and the variety of whole ecosystems. That framework definitely helps organize the complexity. But now the big question. Why does all this matter so much? Why should you, listening right now, deeply care about biodiversity?
This is really the heart of it, isn't it? The sources make it clear biodiversity is immensely important, both for nature itself and, crucially, for our own human well-being and survival. They break it down into several key roles.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, the ecological role. Basically, every species plays a part. From the biggest animals down to the tiniest soil microbes, they all have functions within their ecosystem. Ecosystems work, they sustain themselves, because all these different organisms are contributing something, interacting with each other.
A giant interconnected web. And the sources mentioned thinking about how humans contribute to that, which, given what we just said about our impact, feels a bit heavy.
It is a challenging thought. But think about the core functions biodiversity underpins. Capturing solar energy, producing and breaking down organic matter, cycling water and nutrients, regulating the gases in the atmosphere, even influencing climate patterns. These aren't just nice-to-have ecological features, they are the planet's fundamental life support systems.
Systems that we absolutely depend on for survival.
Totally. And this links directly to the idea of stability, which the sources emphasize.
How so? More diversity means more stability.
Generally, yes. Think of it like, well, like having a diversified investment portfolio versus putting all your money in one stock. A more biodiverse ecosystem has more components, more pathways, more redundancy. If one species is hit hard by disease or environmental change, others might be able to fill similar roles, keeping the overall system functioning.
So it has more resilience.
Exactly. It has a better chance of weathering disturbances, adapting to change. A less diverse system is often more brittle. Losing one key species can cause the whole thing to unravel much more easily. High biodiversity makes ecosystems more robust.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so essential ecologically. What about the economic role?
Biodiversity is also a massive economic resource. The most obvious example is crop diversity, or agrobiodiversity, all the different varieties of plants and animals we've cultivated and domesticated for food. But it goes way beyond that.
Like medicines.
Yes, pharmaceuticals are a huge one. Many modern drugs were derived from compounds first found in plants, fungi, microbes. Think aspirin from willow bark, penicillin from mold. Biodiversity is this vast, largely untapped reservoir for potential new foods, medicines, cosmetic ingredients, industrial materials.
So food crops, livestock, timber, fish, medicinal resources, it provides tangible goods.
Absolutely. But the sources add a critical warning here. While it is an economic resource, viewing it only through that lens, just as something to be exploited for profit, has ironically been a major driver of its destruction.
Ah, the double-edged sword again. Its value can lead to its overuse.
Precisely. And it also leads to complex issues and conflicts over who gets to use these resources, who benefits, who controls them.
Okay, so economic value is there, but it's complicated. What about the scientific role? What does biodiversity teach us?
Well, think about it. Every single species is the result of millions, sometimes billions of years of evolutionary trial and error. Each one is a living library, holding clues about how life evolved, how it adapts, how biological systems work.
So studying diversity helps us understand life itself.
Fundamentally, yes. It helps us understand genetics, ecology, physiology, how life functions at every level. And it helps us understand the specific roles species play in keeping ecosystems healthy, including the ecosystems we depend on. It's vital for basic science and for finding solutions to problems, whether environmental or medical.
A key to understanding the planet, and maybe ourselves too. Which brings us to the last role mentioned, one that might feel less tangible but is clearly important in the sources, the ethical role.
Yes, the sources strongly present an ethical perspective. This viewpoint argues that biodiversity has intrinsic value, value in and of itself, regardless of its usefulness to humans.
Meaning species have a right to exist.
Exactly, that it's our ethical responsibility to recognize this inherent right. And from this perspective, causing extinction through our actions is morally wrong. The state of biodiversity, then, becomes a sort of measure of our relationship with the rest of life on Earth. And it's worth noting, this idea of inherent value is deeply embedded in many cultures around the world.
So summarizing the importance. Ecologically essential for the planet, economically vital but complex, scientifically invaluable for understanding life, and ethically significant for our place in the world. Wow. Yet despite all that, you said earlier the trend is rapid loss. What's driving this decline so fast?
The sources paint a pretty stark picture. It's tightly linked to human population growth and our increasing consumption. Several major drivers are consistently identified.
Let's walk through them. Overexploitation and deforestation seem like big ones.
Huge, especially again in those tropical regions. Remember the stats, quarter of the world's land, 3/4 of the people, half the species. That creates intense pressure. Clearing forests for farming, logging, building cities, it directly destroys habitats. Plain and simple.
Wiping out homes for countless species.
And overexploitation, fishing stocks faster than they replenish, hunting animals unsustainably, that's just as damaging, taking too much too fast.
Okay, habitat loss and taking too much. What else?
Natural calamities are mentioned too. Big events like earthquakes, major floods, volcanic eruptions, large-scale forest fires, severe droughts. These can obviously cause massive sudden damage to local biodiversity. While natural, their impact can be worse in ecosystems already weakened by human pressures.
And pollutants. We hear a lot about pollution.
Yes, things like pesticides, industrial chemicals, heavy metals, even plastic waste. These can poison organisms directly or accumulate in the food chain, weakening species, reducing their ability to reproduce, making them more vulnerable to disease or other stresses. It's like a slow, persistent poisoning of the environment.
Nasty stuff. What about invasive species? Are they a big factor?
They really are. The sources call them exotic species, basically. Species introduced by humans, accidentally or on purpose, into places where they don't naturally occur. The problem is they can wreak havoc.
How?
They might outcompete native species for food or space. They might prey on native species that have no evolved defenses against them, or they might introduce diseases the native wildlife can't handle. They disrupt the existing ecological balance, often with devastating consequences for native plants and animals.
Like throwing a wrench into a finely tuned machine. And the last driver mentioned?
Poaching, the illegal hunting and killing of animals, often for specific high-value parts, horns, tusks, skins, scales, traditional medicine ingredients. The sources list examples we all know: tigers, elephants, rhinos, but also crocodiles, certain birds, even plants sometimes. This targeted killing can decimate populations very quickly, pushing species towards the brink.
Right. So habitat destruction, overexploitation, pollution, invasive species, poaching. It's a grim list of threats stacking up. Given this reality, conservation isn't just a knife idea, it sounds absolutely necessary.
It is vital. The sources stress this interconnection. Losing species degrades the environment that supports all life, including us. Conservation is fundamentally about protecting the integrity of the natural systems we completely rely on.
So how do we even start? With potentially millions of species at risk, how do conservationists prioritize? Is there a system?
Yes, there has to be. Organizations like the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, play a key role here. They maintain the famous Red List of Threatened Species, which categorizes species based on their risk of extinction. This helps focus conservation efforts.
And what are the main categories we should know? Endangered species.
That's probably the best known one. Endangered means a species is facing a very high risk of extinction in the wild in the near future. Things are critical.
Okay. And vulnerable species.
Vulnerable species are considered likely to become endangered soon if the threats causing their decline aren't addressed. Their numbers have dropped significantly, or their habitat is shrinking, making their future uncertain.
And rare species.
Rare species naturally have small populations. They might live only in a very specific limited area or just be thinly spread out. While not necessarily in immediate danger like endangered species, their low numbers make them inherently vulnerable to threats. Any loss is significant.
So categories to help triage the problem. Okay, once threatened species or areas are identified, what are the strategies? What can actually be done?
Well, the sources point to things like the World Conservation Strategy, which came out of the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio. It lays out some key principles.
Such as?
Things like directly preserving known and endangered species, emphasizing proactive planning and management to prevent extinction, not just react to it, conserving the genetic diversity within our food crops, livestock, timber trees, and importantly, their wild relatives.
The wild relatives are key for future breeding and resilience, right?
Absolutely. So identifying and protecting the habitats of those wild relatives is crucial. Also, safeguarding specific habitats essential for different life stages, where species feed, breed, rest, raise young. And finally, regulating the international trade in wildlife to stop unsustainable harvesting.
That sounds like a comprehensive global framework. Are there examples of national actions? India was mentioned?
Yes. As an example, India passed its Wildlife Protection Act back in 1972. This law enabled the creation of national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, and larger biosphere reserves, basically, setting aside protected areas with different levels of regulation to conserve nature within its own environment.
Creating safe zones. Are there specific places on Earth that get special global attention for conservation?
Definitely. Two key concepts come up in the sources. First, mega-diversity centers. These are a specific group of countries, mostly in the tropics, that together hold a huge chunk of the world's total species diversity.
Like Brazil, Indonesia.
Exactly. Mexico, Colombia, Peru, China, India are on the list too. Concentrating some effort in these countries makes sense because they're stewards of so much global biodiversity.
Okay, so mega diverse countries. And the other concept, biodiversity hotspots.
Right. Hotspots are a bit different. They're specific regions identified, again, often by groups like IUCN, that have exceptionally high levels of biodiversity, especially endemic species, species found nowhere else, and are also facing extreme threats, like massive habitat loss.
So high diversity plus high threat equals a hotspot.
Pretty much. The idea is to focus limited conservation funds and efforts in these areas where you can potentially prevent the largest number of extinctions per dollar spent. Madagascar is a classic example. Tons of unique species, massive deforestation. Hawaii is another, threatened by invasives in development.
That sounds like a very strategic, almost triage-like approach to a massive problem.
It has to be, unfortunately, given the scale and limited resources.
Yeah.
But the sources make a crucial final point about all these strategies, which that laws, parks, and hotspots aren't enough on their own. Success requires widespread education, a shift towards genuinely environment-friendly practices in everything we do, pursuing sustainable development that works with nature, not against it. And critically, it needs the active involvement and cooperation of local communities and every individual.
It's not just top-down. It needs bottom-up support.
Exactly. And they stress the challenge isn't just setting up conservation programs, it's ensuring the continuation of the process. It has to be ongoing, adaptive, integrated into how we live.
The continuation of the process, that really sticks. It's not a finish line we cross.
No, it's a constant commitment.
So wrapping this deep dive up, we've journeyed from defining biodiversity, not just species counts, but that intricate web of genetic, species, and ecosystem variety built over billions of years. We've explored why it matters so profoundly, ecologically, economically, scientifically, ethically.
Recognizing its fundamental value and function.
We've faced the tough reality of its rapid loss, driven largely by us through habitat destruction, overexploitation, pollution, invasive species, poaching. And we've looked at the conservation response, identifying threats, setting priorities like endangered species and hotspots, and the strategies being used, from global agreements to national parks.
And highlighting that crucial need for sustained effort and broad involvement.
It really brings us back to that ethical dimension, doesn't it? If biodiversity is the result of billions of years of evolution, the engine of our planet's life support, and maybe even a mirror reflecting our relationship with nature, what does its current rapid decline truly tell us about ourselves and our impact?
Yeah.
And perhaps the most critical question the sources leave us with is, looking forward, how do we genuinely ensure that continuation of the process? How do we balance our undeniable human needs with what seems like a fundamental responsibility to protect the very fabric of life that sustains us all?
It's a huge question. And the urgency comes through loud and clear from everything we've looked at today.
It certainly does. Something profound to keep thinking about. Thank you for exploring this with us on the deep dive.